So what we did is we took the Socratean idea, the idea of Socrates, in which he, according to Plato, spoke about the good life, and for which he ultimately got executed, as you well know. And that idea of the good life has kind of filtered its way through philosophical thought and popular culture. What is the good life? What does it look like? Every culture, every family, every individual begins to collage the idea of what the good life looks like. It might not be intentional and measured and documented, but it's real. And it's based on those definitions that we determine whether we're happy or not. But what if we take that off the table? What if what Paul did was he actually took these brand new Gentile believers. In other words, they were not Jewish. They did not come through the Hebraic culture. But he began and put them on a brand new journey, kind of Greco-Roman, and began to put them on a brand new journey of this could be what the good life looks like. And for 6 chapters, he has meandered us through the things that matter to our Christian life. This we know. Every one of us should have been or were offended somewhere on the line. Something was said, written, done, sung that offends my cultural upbringing, offends my Orange County lifestyle, my wishes, my definition of happiness. One of the ways he did it was he identified 10 pictures of the church. If you take the 6 chapters and you meander your way through, you will see he tries to help these brand new Jesus lovers. Now remember, they weren't Hebrews. They weren't used to the synagogue. They weren't used to Yahweh. They weren't used to the 10 Commandments. All of this was brand new. If anything, they were used to the Temple of Artemis or Diana. They were used to the library with its 1,200, 1,500 scrolls. They were not used to this. And it's almost as if he takes time to say, this is what church looks like. Jesus is the head. Jesus is our Messiah, our conquering King, our Redeemer, our Savior, our lover, our carer. But what he did, Jesus did, is he established the church. And there are 10 things, and I'm just going to give them to you with very limited explanation, but by way of précis, because what David's going to bring tonight has to come on this foundation. In chapter 1, verse 1, he speaks about them being a holy people. The word holy doesn't mean I don't sin. It means we are distinctively different from. It's a beautiful word. Holiness is not a scary thought or idea. It's not there as a mirror to continuously shout at me, you're so bad, you suck, you're no good, God's deeply disappointed with you. What the word holy means, it means I take you out from where you are and now I make you completely and distinctively different. All right? I come out of South Africa. I come and live in America. The moment I open my mouth, I am distinctively different. And that's the idea. And so Paul's opening salvo is what Jesus did is he took you out of to make you completely different from. That doesn't mean we can't dress in a fun way or listen to fun music. It doesn't mean any of that. It means that in our soul is a distinctively differentness. And that's a lifetime's journey. The second thing he steps into is the church or the ecclesia or the called out ones. It's this wonder of being chosen. That's why we are always hankering after meaning. Why am I here? What am I doing here? Why am I studying this silly degree, having to read all about these weird philosophers or theologians or math or calculus? Why? And it's that idea is written into the very nature of church. We have been called to a higher calling. Honestly, and David, I'm watching the clock. Honestly, it's the saddest thing for me that so few Christians understand the ecclesia nature. We are the called out ones, not superior. There's a humility and a gentleness and a grace and a favor on that reality. All right, moving quickly. The church is a body, Jesus is the head, and we're all parts together. One of the little drifts that breaks my heart is people thinking they can live their Christian life without community. It's such a weird thought. Imagine if we were worshiping tonight and suddenly an arm floats by. Hi. Who are you? Oh, I'm an arm. And where's your body? No, sorry, I just arm it. I'm just an arm. I don't need a body. I just have this bleeding side that just bleeds nonstop and I float out. And next week I'll be with another body and then a body after that. And it seems ludicrous if it wasn't so tragic. Every word here is plural. We were meant for each other. All right. He goes on to speak about fellow citizens, which has a beautiful body of theology to it. Members of a household. And that's why I love us eating together. It's the family we miss every day. Every day I want my daughter Nassia to call and say, hey, Dad, you want to come around for pizza? It ain't going to happen. Even though she carries my demeanor and carries not my looks, thank the Lord. She carries the genes. The reality is, she lives in Australia. It's not going to happen. But this is our household. This is our family. This is what we do together. All right, moving on quickly. A whole building, a holy temple, a dwelling, a bride, and the one we get to tonight, and that's why I'm rushing, is the army. Now, in our 21st century Western world, the notion of the church as an army is extremely foreign. Now, I'm a history nerd, as you know, graduated with a degree in history, so my default button is to go into the historical context. One of the things I love about reading of the Roman era and the time in which the scriptures were written on this point is how the Romans trained together. They had body-length shields, and the men in the front would walk together, and the shields would lightly interlock. And they would march together in rhythm on the enemy. The barbarians would run at them and charge at them in all sorts of chaos and intimidation. But the Romans would just march together in step with each other. Those who were in the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth rows behind would lift their shields over. So when the arrows came, the front person was protected from the arrows, even though his shield was in front of him, because the person behind him was covering him. Those on the side held their shields on the side, and so they created a tortoise shell to protect the whole company from the fiery darts of the enemy. Sounds kind of biblical, doesn't it? So Paul was using imagery that they would well have known by story, by legend, by myth, and sometimes even by personal experience. And so what we have here is Paul introducing an idea that's foreign to most worshippers, for whom shalom is the biggest speech. Peace, kindness, gentleness. And he introduces us to the idea that we are people at war. You know why we are sometimes so exhausted? You think, I'm so tired and I don't even know why. You're living in a battle zone. Growing up in South Africa during the Civil War, we know what it's like. You sleep lightly at night. Every time there's a rustle going on down the road, I wake up. You know, I was a soldier, so you train, you listen carefully. What are the sounds? What are the noises? Are they dangerous? Is my family in danger? You are perpetually exhausted because all the time there is the mood of civil war all around you. And ladies and gentlemen, we are in civil war because there's a rebellion. Isaiah 14, we have an enemy who was an angel who took a third of the angels with him and rebelled against God. It is a cosmic civil war, and the battleground is where we live. It's your address and mine. We have an enemy, foreign and domestic. Foreign is external in, the enemy and his cohorts who wants to rob, kill, and destroy. Domestic is what happens inside of me that wants to self-defeat me. But we're not going to do it alone. You're not going to do it alone. Even when they send small groups of specially trained operatives, they go 2 by 2, 12s. I'll tell you a quick story. David, you ready? You can come up. And we were in up the operational area in Namibia, which is just north of South Africa. It was a desert warfare. And I remember us walking through, on patrol, walking through a desert jungle. In other words, right in the middle of the desert, you suddenly go through this very dense bushed area. And of course, when you're in the desert, you walk very spread out. You buddy to buddy, you're a long way away. And I remember as we hit the jungle, how we concertinaed into each other. Because instantly was that sense, I need to know where my buddy is. The army of God is meant to be close and tight. Yeah. We put our shields up. We cover each other. We stand together. I know that you're there. When my arms are flagging and the arrows are taking me down, I need to know David's there. He needs to know I'm there. Because God has knit our hearts together. Our shields are interconnected. And I think you're going to be blessed by what he has to say. David, over to you.
Get my water real quick.
What's in the floor?
Just water, a little bit of a cough, so bear with me. So I just want to start with a quote by C.S. Lewis. I think he puts it pretty well. He says, "Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one. The gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts." Father, be here in this moment, God. Fill me with your love. Fill everyone in this room, Father, with your love, God. We need you. We want you. Your will be done here, God. Amen. So before we really jump into it, I think it's important that to understand Ephesians 6, we really have to remember and focus, or not focus, but just remember Ephesians 1. So in Ephesians 1, verses 4 and 5, it says, "For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for the adoption of sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will." And then we jump down to verse 18, and it says, "I pray the eyes of your heart may be enlightened in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people, and his incomparably great power for us who believe." So then when we get to chapter 6, it makes sense. It can be attainable, and it becomes personal. Because the Father loves you, and he has chosen you. And what more would a good God Father want than to pour out his love and his power into his sons and his daughters? So that same power that rose Jesus from the grave is extended to all who want it. But that comes with a cost. See, when you side with Jesus, you get a target on your back. As Chris said, you enter a battleground. And that sounds a whole lot scarier when you forget that the battle has already been won. So it's promised, yes, it'll be hard, but yes, it's doable. Paul alludes to that in verse 13 of chapter 6. He says, "And after you have done everything, stand." But it's going to take everything. So how do you and I put on the armor of God? As I started to sit with this chapter, Chris gave me this assignment like 3 weeks ago, so I got to kind of sit with it, just let it marinate over me. And the story of David and Goliath kind of just flooded into my head. And it isn't blatantly stated in the text, but I can just imagine that the story was just full of spiritual warfare. As David sees and hears this Philistine, Goliath, as he sees and hears what he's saying against the Israelites, he becomes furious. David's not even supposed to be near the battleground. He's actually bringing food to his brothers. But when he gets there, he sees that it's a standstill. And again, when he hears the giant, he just gets so angry, and he decides something has to be done. And he starts speaking words of just boldness and faith. And somehow word gets back to the king. And for some reason, the king calls David into his tent. And David gets there, and the king just starts speaking these words over him. "You're not good enough. You're too small. You're too weak. This guy is much better than you. You have no chance." But the way David responds really amazes me. He tells the king how he's grown up a shepherd, how lions and bears have come to feast on his dad's sheep, and he was there to kill him. And as the lion and the bear fell, the Philistine will be struck down because of his defiance of the living God. He says, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. So the king says, okay. And he says, but in order to do that, you're going to need this. So the king gives him his armor, or tells him to take this into battle. And David tries it on, but it doesn't fit. So he takes it off and tells the king thanks, but no thanks. And he goes off to meet the giant in the battle. And we all know, or maybe we don't all know, what happens next. But David defeats the giant with a slingshot and a rock. But my focus wasn't on the moments, or wasn't on that. It was the moments leading up to that. When the world was feeding him these different narratives that he was unequipped and destined to fail, what's really amazing is that he didn't hear any of that. And what I know in my heart was happening in those moments was David leaning into the Father. And David hearing these words, David, my son, I love you and I am proud of you. I am with you. I've given you everything and will continue to give you everything. In me, far greater things than this will you accomplish. What David did in that moment was lean into the Father. He let the Father equip him with his own armor that was exclusively David's. And I love that he wants to do that with all of us. So 2 points that I want to make. 1, the enemy will be there to throw whatever he can at you, both truth and lies that are meant to handicap you. And 2, the armor that the king offered David, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't David's. So again, how do we equip ourselves with God's armor? I think we get alone with him and we learn who we are, both the good, the bad, and the ugly, and who he made us to be and is calling us into every day. Because when he made you, he had something beautiful in mind, something amazing. These pieces of armor that Paul presents to us can be weird and strange, foreign even, as Chris said. I don't remember the last time I needed a breastplate or a shield. But when we kind of just take the concepts that Paul presents, it really makes it understandable. So truth, because when you know who you are, lies that are told to you will fall flat. And the truths that are told to you to hurt you, you already know them. It's a weakness, I know. That's okay. And when you know who the Father is, you know you're on the winning side. Righteousness. But knowing that it's the Father's righteousness and not our own. So that means even when we mess up, we can claim his righteousness over us. It's an ongoing and ever-present tension, but it's as our right as sons and daughters. We can pull his righteousness over us. He gives it to us freely. Peace. That the Father will always be with you. That's a promise. He says, I will never leave you, nor will I forsake you. So you can go into any situation confidently, knowing that you have the creator of the universe on your side. Wow. That'll bring you peace, right? Jeez. Faith, that the Father is exactly who he says he is. And he will continue to do all that he has promised. And he wants you to succeed. Salvation, that the Father really predestined you from before time began to be part of his family. That he will choose you, that he chose you, and will continue to choose you every single day, even when you mess up. And the last piece that he brings to the table, which is such an important piece, is the Spirit, who is there to empower us, to coach us, to guide us, to lead us, both in the heat of combat and in the everyday. These pieces the Father wants to give you. It's an offer. We just have to accept them. And as we understand who we are, both the now and the not yet, and lean into the Father, we begin to equip ourselves with the armor of God. So this armor will be specifically yours, and it will allow you to do whatever God has called you to do. And when you have done everything, to stand. And you look around, and you see your brothers and your sisters all well-equipped for battle. And you can run with joy of the Lord, that knowing that you were chosen and you were ready. So, just as much as this is an individual piece, this is a communal piece. We have the opportunity and really the obligation to stand next to, in front of, and behind our community. As Chris said, and gave us a beautiful picture of the army who had the shields, and they covered each other. When we know how loved we are by the Father, and we know He loves everyone the same as He loves me, then it gives me permission and really just calls me into loving that person the same way the Father loves me. Without limit, without reservation, without any record of wrong. Because our struggle is not against flesh and blood. And it's a spiritual battle we must face every day. So that's what I have for you guys.
Good.
So if God gives everyone their own armor, what do you think is the biggest, most necessary part of your armor?
My armor. I think it's almost like I think the most important part of my armor is that it's God's armor and He loves me. So it doesn't really... What?
Shield of faith.
Exactly. Like, the lies don't have to penetrate me, and the truths can fall flat because I know I'm loved. But I think that's a big piece that is in my armor, and part of my weapon is just the way that I can love on people and make them feel welcomed and accepted, and and at home. I think that's my biggest piece.
That's wonderful. 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 What about you, Heather? Where are you? What...